Hello, and welcome to another week. Remember, the work week is a fiction. Monday doubly so. You can get rid of them if you really want to. This is Social Justice Alchemy. Now, before I dive into this week's docket, I want to go ahead and let you know that I'm feeling a little under the weather. There's something going on with my chest, makes it hard for me to breathe and speak normally. Every time I try to take a deep breath, I get this, stabbing pain. Don't worry, doctors are already on it, insofar as they can, over the weekend. But that means that there might be some oddities with my voice this week. We'll see. I'm recording this segment first thing. That said, let's go ahead and to the rant. So, there are two kinds of centrists, and they both piss me off. The first are the right-wing douches like Carl Benjamin and Dave Rubin. Assholes who are too afraid, or dishonest, or pig-ignorant to realize they're right-wing. Benjamin might just be that ignorant, but I'm convinced Rubin is just dishonest. But it's the other group that's got me pissed off today. The group that says the two parties are the same. There's no point in voting. How fucking blind would you have to be to actually think that? Setting aside the people who are just avoiding stating their opinion because they're afraid to stand up for their convictions, there are people who actually think this, unless they're all just scared. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not here to sing the praises of the Democrats. They are beholden to corporate money. They're an entrenched interest run by the upper class. In a word, they're corrupt. But come on! The Dems at least try. They know that racism, misogyny, and homophobia are wrong, and even if they're not willing to actually fight them, they at least have a wing of the party that forces them to care a little bit about people suffering. The Republicans, though? They're assholes. An alliance of two kinds of villains. They're the KKK on the one hand and naked greed on the other. They're every movie and TV villain for the last 40 years. At least the ones without superpowers. Hell, even a few of the ones with powers. The Republican Party openly wants people to suffer and is actively working to destroy democracy around the globe. Some of them are only in it for profit, but the rest are doing it because of their sincerely held religious beliefs that some people are naturally inferior and or evil, and must suffer here on Earth before getting shipped off to hell to suffer for the rest of eternity. Now, the Democrats are terrified of change. They're run by short-sighted clowns who are very comfortable with the status quo and wish all those identity people would quit rocking the boat. But at least they recognize that some things are wrong and should probably change. And there are a lot of really fucked up things Republicans do that the Democrats just don't. Like preventing people from voting. Thuglicans have packed the courts with the sort of ideological assholes even they wouldn't accept 30 years ago. Activists so naked in their hypocrisy that Bork would blush. And that's why the fascists can get away with purging voter rolls without notice and shutting down polling places in Democratic districts. And they're so goddamn willing to accept a victory, no matter the source, that they've stalled a bill meant to safeguard our elections from foreign interference. And all that's on top of the gerrymandering so brazen that judges are calling them on it. Democrats try, but they have nothing on the Confederates when it comes to gerrymandering. And the Democrats don't stab government with people fundamentally opposed with the duty of their office. No pacifists in the Department of Defense, no vegans overseeing the ranchers, no anti-vaxxers or alternative med quacks in the CDC, but the Thuglicans can't seem to help it. They've got a whole army of umbrages in the wings ready to dismantle the oversight that prevents their bullshit. Oil lobbyists in the EPA, fundamentalist homeschooler DeVos in education. The guy who wants to dismantle energy, Rick Perry, who didn't even know that energy manages our nukes, in charge of energy. And a fucking asbestos lobbyist who is in the process of legalizing fucking asbestos. The Dems just don't do this Orwellian bullshit. And taxes. Forget what the fascists say. Democrats haven't put a new tax in place in decades. But they're not doing the Thuglican shit. They keep cutting taxes. But only for the wealthy. Meanwhile, they have to keep the budget balanced, so they shift the burden on everyone else. That's why the middle class is disappearing and the poor are getting poorer. The rich are paying less and less. The Dems just don't do that. And they're not goddamn Nazis. How the fuck is anyone blind to this? How the fuck is anyone okay with this? Every other year, literal, actual Nazis keep voting, campaigning, and running as Republicans. I'm not just talking about Trump and his very fine people. I'm talking about open, uniformed Nazis on the ballots as Republicans in 2018. I'm talking about Arizona Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who framed a journalist for attempted murder and opened actual concentration camps out in the desert. He bragged about opening fucking concentration camps. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, who was convicted of contempt of court and pardoned by Trump, who went ahead and opened up his own goddamn concentration camps for kids. I'm talking about Nazis in the goddamn White House, like Steve Bannon, who told the Holocaust-denying far-right-wing party in France that history is on our side, who courted the alt-right here in the U.S., the alt-right that marched and murdered in Charlottesville, the march that Trump called very fine people, the Steve Bannon whose rag of a newspaper likes to bracket some names with little globes so that his readers know they're talking about evil globalist Jews. And I'm talking about Donald fucking Trump. The Democrats didn't elect Trump twice. The Democrats aren't supporting him, aren't protecting him, aren't, propping up his bullshit agenda and policies. The Republicans are. The Republicans are the ones still showing up at his goddamn rallies, still kissing the ring of that piece of shit, racist, misogynist, transphobic, anti-Semitic, rapist thief. The Dems are a conservative right-wing party, but they're not fucking Republicans, not by a long shot. Anyone who says the two parties are the same is either dangerously ignorant or a pitiful slack-jawed liar. Either way, don't trust them with anything sharp or heavy. It's probably obvious to most of you, but I really wanted to get it off my chest. How about let's move on to some stories. Now, if you're not reading Amanda Marcotte, you definitely should be. This first story is a piece by her over at Salon.com, titled Brett Kavanaugh's Disturbing Abortion History. He ruled against women who were forced to abort. The subtitle, I guess, really it's the piece that's meant to show up so that people will click through. In 2007, 2 disabled women complained about being forced to have abortions, and Kavanaugh ruled against them. Remember how I keep calling the Republicans the fascist party? This is fascist. This is eugenicist. This is deciding who gets to have children and who doesn't. The Republicans haven't always been the fascist party. The right wing in the U.S. has always been fascist. The right wing in the U.S. were reluctant to go to war with the Nazis because the Nazis were taking from the American playbook when they set up their programs. And fascists are all about control. They don't give a damn about life. The Republican Party, their line about saving unborn children is a complete and utter load of horse shit. What they really want is to enslave women. Okay? Handmaid's Tale might be kind of a science fiction horror story, but it's talking about something real. It's talking about the actual American phenomenon. That is what people like Mike Pence want. That's why they're determined and desperate to get Brett Kavanaugh on the Supreme Court. Because they want complete control over everyone, really. They're just more direct in how they want to control some people. They are perfectly fine with abortions for people who they think are less worthy, or if they think that a child would be an undue burden for a really good and righteous person. That's why they're okay with themselves getting abortions, or their mistresses getting abortions. It's okay for me because I'm better than you. They want to set up a modern-day caste system here in the United States, with people like Trump and Pence and Kavanaugh on top, everyone else beneath them, but not just a 2-tiered system. They want everyone beneath them fighting all the time, which is why they encourage racism and homophobia and transphobia and misogyny and all those little ways they can keep everyone at each other's throats and not fighting them. Let's move on. Alright, next up from TheGuardian.com. Rudy Giuliani is the fucking golden goose. Headline, Truth Isn't Truth. Giuliani trumps alternative facts with new Orwellian outburst. This goddamn administration just can't seem to help itself. Fake news, alternative facts, truth isn't truth. But this isn't new to this administration. This goes back to, at least, George W. Bush, just off the top of my head. Karl Rove and his bullshit about creating realities, and while you're trying to find facts, we're moving on to the next reality. The Republican Party just does not give one single shit about truth or facts. This is just... Fascists will tell whatever lie they have to. They don't care about truth. All they care about is manipulating the emotions of the people who have invested in their program, so that they can maintain power and enrich themselves. That's all. That's why Trump is so busy attacking the journalists. Because the media is an independent authority. It is there to hold people like him accountable. It is there to provide some access to the truth, and Republicans just can't have that. Fascists just can't have that. So, yeah, Giuliani might have been a little bit bald in the way he said it, but as far as they're concerned, truth isn't truth. Truth, for the fascist, is whatever they say it is. Whatever's profitable. Whatever is acceptable. Let's go ahead and move on to the next story. Next up, slavery in the USA. Now, you might not be aware, but there is a loophole big enough to drive a truck through in the 15th Amendment's prohibition on slavery. Namely, if you've been convicted of a crime, you can be forced to do labor. However, just because you've been imprisoned and enslaved, once again, in the United States, doesn't mean you are completely helpless. This last week, prisoners went on strike. Quote the feministing article on it, written just before the strike went into effect, incarcerated people across 17 states will refuse to work and engage in hunger strikes and boycotts to demand, quote, humane living conditions, access to rehabilitation, sentencing reformed, and the end of modern-day slavery, end quote. Well, ending the quote within my quote, but continuing, quoting the article, their list of 10 demands includes an immediate end to the racial overcharging, over-sentencing, and parole denials of black and brown humans, repeal of Clinton-era laws that limit rights to appeal, and reinstatement of the voting rights of all confined citizens. That's pretty fucking pernicious, isn't it? Private, for-profit prisons, where people who cannot vote are shipped into a state in order to bolster that state's population for the purpose of the census, then forced to do labor. However, they've gone on strike. At the moment, I don't know what the results of their strike are, but here's hoping that they succeed. If you want to learn more about modern-day slavery, I can, off the top of my head, recommend Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow. Let's move on. Something that was kind of big in the news this last week is that John McCain is discontinuing medical treatment. His brain cancer was pretty serious, and nobody really expected he was going to be able to do much. And him discontinuing treatment is a sign that he is going to die very soon. So people have already begun his eulogies, praising him, praising his service in Vietnam, and praising his service in the Senate. And of course, they've been asking Trump to back down and apologize for the bullshit things he's said about McCain over the years. Trump hasn't. But he hasn't died yet, and I'm going to go on the record now saying that I'm not going to go easy on McCain now, nor after he's died. He called himself a maverick, he positioned himself as a centrist, but the man voted with the Republican Party 95% of the time. He did horrible things to people all across the United States and around the globe. He may have thought he was doing the right thing, he may have suffered in Vietnam, he's still an asshole. If he truly was a good man, he would have left the Republican Party. He would have disobeyed the Republican Party many times over the years, instead of once just before dying. I hope he's not suffering, but I won't be sorry to see him go. Let's move on. Yeah, for fuck's sake, wouldn't you know it? I go ahead and I record that thing on Saturday evening, and the motherfucker goes and dies. Okay, I'm not blaming McCain for dying. You know, he didn't do it on purpose, but the point is that I'm not going to temper my message. He was not really a good person. He was an asshole. He did a lot of very bad things during his life, and just because he has recently died doesn't change that fact. So, I'm not going to piss on his grave for at least a week, but I'm not going to stand back and let people praise him either. He did bad things. He was occasionally polite. He was not a good person. Now, let's go ahead and move on. This next news item comes to us from Australia. I'll stop. From ABC Australia, or maybe it's a different ABC, given that it's in Australia. But, headline, Heinz to pay $2.25 million for misleading and deceptive marketing of sugar-heavy food. The Australian Competition and Consumer Commission followed up on a complaint by the Obesity Policy Coalition about products made mostly from fruit juice, concentrates, and pastes. And it determined that they had misled people through their packaging, and thus they got fined. I've said it before, I'll say it again. The best you can expect from capitalism is amoral behavior, but more frequently what you get is immoral behavior. All that matters is profit. Everything else, including morality, will get pushed to the side. This is not a surprising finding. It is surprising that they got smacked for it even a little bit. But before we move on to our next story, I want to go ahead and remind you that Heinz, the candidate for U.S. President in 2004, was Senator John Kerry, married to Teresa Heinz Kerry, as in the Heinz Corporation. They're everywhere. Ooh, I shouldn't laugh, even at bad jokes. Anyway, now let's come back to the U.S. for our next story. Jefferson Beauregard Sessions III is a piece of shit, and Trump is threatening to fire him. Why? Well, Trump has been upset with Sessions since day one because of Sessions, for once, doing the right thing, technically, and recusing himself from the Russia investigation. Now, Lindsey Graham is a Republican senator from my own state of South Carolina, and he's a mealy-mouthed, two-faced coward. Last year, Graham told CNN, "I'm 100% behind Jeff Sessions. There will be no confirmation hearing for a new Attorney General in 2017. If Jeff Sessions is fired, there will be holy hell to pay." And recently, what he said was, "The President is entitled to an Attorney General he has faith in, and I think there will come a time sooner rather than later where it will be time to have a new face and a fresh voice at the Department of Justice." Lindsey Graham keeps trying to fill McCain's shoes when it comes to being a maverick, but he absolutely does not have the spine for it. He has never once said anything twice. That is to say, he has never had the courage to keep trying to stand up to Trump. He'll make a noise, get smacked down very thoroughly by the Republican voters, and immediately back the fuck down. Lindsey Graham is a goddamn coward. Let's move on. Our penultimate story is a very surprising bit of good news. From Esquire.com, someone has actually been charged for their role in the Flint water crisis. This doesn't happen in the U.S. As the article states, political corruption is one thing, but political crimes against a constituency generally get you a book deal. what's happening is that someone is being charged with manslaughter. Involuntary manslaughter committed against the two people who died as a result of the bullshit that happened up in Flint. Once again, I have to state, this doesn't happen in the U.S. Horrific things can happen because of the failures of government officials, but they usually don't get charged for crimes. Only if you steal money do you get charged with a crime in the U.S. Human lives don't matter. This is pretty fucking wild. I really don't know how it's happening. Hopefully the fine folks over at Opening Arguments will look into this, because I have no freaking clue if this will keep happening. I hope it does. But let's move on to our last story, which is a bit of unqualified good news. And what is that good news? From the BBC, free sanitary products for pupils and students. Every school, college, and university in Scotland is to provide free sanitary products under a new £5.2 million Scottish government scheme. A recent survey had found that about a quarter of school, college, or university students had struggled to find access to sanitary products. So, the government in Scotland is doing the right thing. They're ending period poverty. This is fucking awesome. Community Secretary Eileen Campbell said that she was proud that Scotland was taking world-leading action to fight period poverty among the country's 395,000 pupils and students. She said, "In a country as rich as Scotland, it's unacceptable that anyone should struggle to buy basic sanitary products." Fucking amen, Secretary Campbell. Let's hope the rest of the world catches up to Scotland really damn quick. And I think I'll go ahead and leave it there on a nice, happy note. So, that'll do it for this week in Social Justice Alchemy. If you like what I'm doing here, please go ahead, give positive reviews, thumbs up, what have you. Share it with your friends. Subscribe on iTunes or YouTube. If you want to talk back at me, then you can find me at the surgoshan.blogspot.com. That's SURGOSHAN. Or over at the Social Justice Alchemy YouTube channel. It's a good way to talk at me, leave comments under the videos. I was planning on starting a book club sort of thing, going through and reading The Conquest of Bread by Peter Kropotkin, but given that I'm having trouble taking deep breaths and talking, and I was going to do that as a video series on the YouTube channel, I think I'll go ahead and put that on the back burner until I know what's going on. Otherwise, you can find me over at another podcast run by my friend Kevin. That's dungeonsanddebacles.podcast.com. A group of us are going through a D&D campaign where we're trying to rescue a mother who was imprisoned for trying to find her children. In any event, thank you for listening to Social Justice Alchemy. I'll see you next week.